Καλό απόγευμα, good afternoon. We are here again for another very interesting seminar of HIAAD series called Bridges. And today we have three excellent neuroscientists and clinicians, some of them, some pharmacologists, to speak about a very interesting topic. And I will not waste any more of the time. We're together, and the chair with us is Professor Kostas Lyketsos from the Hopkins University Medical School in the United States, and also Professor Ioannis Zaganas and Christina Dalla. They're going to have this interesting debate. Costa, the floor is yours. Thanks again.
Thank you, Yanni. Hi, everybody. Still morning in Baltimore and evening in Athens. Hope everybody's doing well. The topic is one that's near and dear to my heart because I've been interested in the point that Alzheimer's and dementia in general is a women's disease. And this discussion today in the format of a debate will sort of get to aspects of why I and maybe others think about it. So the topic of the debate is that Alzheimer's is different in men versus women. I thought we could use a voting format today. So I have some questions that I'm going to put forth. And I think you're going to help me put them on the Zoom, and then people can look and you can answer your multiple choice, and we will see what everybody's answering.
Mr. Lori, please present the first question.
So you can just click on the chat box, and this is the main premise. We want to see how many minds are changed by the debate today. So go ahead and click your answer, and the system will inventory. So Doris should be able to show us the results soon. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, so Professor Zaganas is starting at a disadvantage, or maybe it's an advantage. He has more minds to change.
It's better than zero.
Let's go to the next question. Okay, so answers, actually 3 questions, so go ahead and answer all of them. Maybe we can see the answers. Hopefully everybody's voted. Maybe we can go with the votes that we have. Okay.
Can you?
So let me comment that on the incidence question, I think the balance of the evidence, which isn't entirely crystal clear, suggests that it's higher in women than in men. We're talking risk. We're not talking prevalence. So this is not a question of more women live to older ages, a risk estimation. So it seems higher in women than men is, in my book, the right answer, especially for older ages. The course of Alzheimer's disease tends to be more rapid in women than in men. From the few studies that have looked at that, again, not completely crystal clear, but pretty solid evidence. And yes, the third question referred to the caregiver closeness ratings research that we have published. If caregivers feel close, the progression of dementia seems to be slower. We don't know that it's because of that, but there's a pretty strong association. It primarily holds if the caregiver is a woman. So this is my usual admonition to the men in this group. Be nice to your wives, because if they feel close to you when you get dementia, they'll take better care of you. So let's then go on and have Christina develop the yes point of view that Alzheimer's is different in women compared to men. And then we'll do that for 10 minutes, and then we'll hear from Yanni.
Okay, let me share my screen. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And I need to thank Ioannis Zaganas for his persistence and to convince me to do that. So, but it was fun preparing for this, and it's also very close to my research interests. So I'm glad that I will talk for the next 10 minutes. I will try to convince you. First of all, before I talk about this, I want to convince you, if possible, that at least we need to integrate sex and gender in research, in general, in research, but of course in health research, and also in mental health, and also neurological research and neuropsychological. And this is a commentary that I recently wrote. And another thing that is important to remember and remind to everybody is that when we're talking about sex and gender, it's something complex. It's not, especially gender is very complex. It's not binary, at least anymore. Probably it was never binary, but now we know that it's not. And but even sex, when we're talking about the sex, when we're talking about animals, we're talking about males and females, but about humans, we know that there is a small percentage of humans that they are intersex. So at some point in the future, we also need research about these populations. But for now, we're going to talk about men and women. And we know that, of course, gender is very much influenced and developed by other factors, also apart from biology, also psychological, cultural, and other factors. And this is something important also for Alzheimer's disease research. And recently there was a study showing that even though women suffer more from Alzheimer's disease than men, and here it says that patients with Alzheimer's disease are 2/3 of patients are women. But in clinical trials, as you can see, it's only 59 to 58% of inclusion of women. And also many times, and I don't have time to show any slides about that, but just to remind you that many times, even in clinical trials, even if we have both men and women, there is no design or analysis based on sex. So even though we have the data, sometimes we don't really make any research on that, or we don't really evaluate them. So the findings that I will show you, the data are not so many because there is not so much research on, especially on sex differences, sex effects in Alzheimer's. And I think that we need more research in general for Alzheimer's, but also for psychopharmacology and neuropsychopharmacology, and in general for pharmacology in total. So, of course, the numbers differ. It depends on exactly where we look and what we look. But in general, we know that women are more risk than men for Alzheimer's disease. It's interesting that there are some differences depending on the continent. So in Europe, there are more women. The difference is larger than in the United States between women and men in prevalence. There is an interesting wait, I have it a bit later. So regarding sex difference in the age, of course, we know which risk factors are important for Alzheimer's disease, and we know that sex is a risk factor, but also, as it was mentioned before by Dr. Lyketsos, we know that it interacts with age. So especially for older women, there is a bigger difference, and there are differences also that are based on comorbidities and on environmental factors like stress. So this is the study that I wanted to show you before. There is an interesting study from the Women's Brain Project that was recently published, it was 2 years ago, at Alzheimer's and Dementia journal. And it has many different data, but in one of them, we can see here an estimation of the number of persons with alpha-beta positive Alzheimer's disease across ages, and you can see that the differences exist, especially after 70 years old. And this, as women grow, this difference between men and women is more, especially in dementia, that's Alzheimer's disease dementia, not so much about prodromal and preclinical Alzheimer's disease. Also, it's known, of course, that it's a complex phenomenon, that it's interesting that women with normal cognition or with mild cognitive impairment perform better, and we know that also from sex differences research in verbal memory and fluency tasks compared to men that might miss early diagnosis, but also women progress faster to more advanced stages once symptoms manifest, as also I think most of the participants here had this wrong at the second question of Dr. Lyketsos. So women progress faster, and also it's interesting that there is evidence for higher tau pathology burden in women, faster accumulation of tau, and faster rates of brain atrophy. And also this was also published at another very interesting review from the same group, from the Women's Brain Project in Switzerland. And again, here they show that the brain atrophy in women with a mild cognitive impairment is higher in women than men. And there are some key points about also the genetic risk that I will talk a bit later. Of course, there are other factors that they play a role, and it's not only the women, I mean, the sex and the age. There are also some environmental factors, and some of them are reviewed here. This is from a book from that is dedicated on sex and gender difference in Alzheimer's disease. And of course, we know about that. We talk about a lot, but it's important to remember that in all of these risk factors, there are also sex differences. We know that at least in the past, men had a higher education than women. And we know that men suffer more from hypertension and heart problems than women, or they suffer more from brain injury and alcohol abuse. But women have more higher rates of depression, anxiety, and also in some cases there is more social isolation. I don't think that this is true for Greece or for the Mediterranean area, but at least in Asia or in other places, there is more social isolation in women than in men. And all of these are risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. The sex difference in depression, which it's supposed to be in a way, it has been proposed that it could be also a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. We know that it's twice. Here are it's not a prevalent, these are the DALYs, the years of disability adjusted life for men and women. They are global estimates, and you can see the red is for depression and anxiety, and you can see the sex difference that it's higher in females and males, even at older age. It starts after puberty, but it's still higher even at older age. So this could also be a reason why women suffer more from depression, from Alzheimer's than men. Also, of course, we know that there are many genes, thousands of genes, as you can see here, that they are expressed differently in men and women in the whole body, but also in the brain. And one of these genes is that there is a huge, not huge, but there is a sex difference, is the ApoE4. And this has been associated with different risk in men and women. So there is evidence that the ApoE4 genotype increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease in women, and also females with higher amyloid beta exhibit faster decline than males. And in this paper that I show you here, it suggests that the data suggests that females who were AB and apoprotein E4 positive decline faster than their male counterparts. So there is probably a genetic risk. Also, there are risks. I don't have much time, but there are also some findings about different biomarkers, differences in the hippocampus, that men have a lower burden of neurofibrillary tangles than women. So there is a presence of higher neurofibrillary tangles in women than in men in the hippocampus, which is also a very interesting finding. There are also a lot of preclinical findings, and Ioannis Zaganas has some, and recently we have worked, but we have some unpublished data as well about sex differences in models of stress and about the tau pathology in males and females. And here you can see that in females, there is an aggregation of tau higher in stress females than in males.
Christina, why don't you make like a 30-second to a minute summary statement so we can give Yanni equivalent time?
Yes, I'm done. So we have seen so far that there are differences in the clinical and preclinical level. We also have a lot of findings about models of depression and anxiety that I'm not going to explain here. And one last thing that it's important, because I'm sure we're going to ask about that, is about the effect of hormones. That there is a lot of research on that, both preclinically and clinically. And of course, we know that women have all these fluctuations, but also testosterone plays a role. In women, there is a lot of evidence showing that after menopause, there is an increase in pathology. You can see here the dotted line for women with an increase in age after menopause, about amyloid and tau, and also a decrease in glucose metabolism. And also in when we give hormone replacement therapy, so far there are a lot of studies, many different and complicated studies, but it seems that there might be a benefit in younger ages, 45 to 55. There is this window, but it could enhance the risk of Alzheimer's disease in higher age.
Christina, I'm going to...
That's all for now. And yes, I don't think I need to show you more. It's just that all these hormones and all these steroids also happen in the brain, so it's much more complicated than we want to think. And maybe in the future we'll find some drugs that they target especially the brain. And all this happen also in the male brain, not only the female brain. So in a way, it is different, but we don't know. I don't think it's only the hormones. It's much more complicated.
Thank you, Christina. Yanni, you're on. Tell us why Christina's wrong.
And of course, you can read all about it in the book.
I hope she does. Okay, sorry. I intervened at the most important slide.
Yes, no, that's for everybody. That we have this book. Of course, everybody knows there is a chapter on about sex difference in Alzheimer's disease, and also there is a book from the same from the Cretan University Press about gender medicine as well.
So, Christina, please stop sharing. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I will not disagree about the book. Just a moment, I want to start sharing. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
So the only thing I agree with Christina is about the book. Of course, I'm joking. I agree in other things too. So I'm also very happy to be part of this Bridges series that was that started from Yannis Sotiropoulos and other people. And I think this is a very interesting format of presenting things because it's less boring sometimes. Okay, so this is my conflict of interest. So I think you should take it seriously and see my presentation under this. So I would like to start with this, and maybe we should have a poll on this, or maybe Dr. Lyketsos, who says that it's a woman's disease, Alzheimer's disease, if he can tell us which of these MRIs from a normal control, an MCI patient and Alzheimer's patients are from a female. Can you tell that?
Well,
no,
it's obvious.
I thought so.
All of them.
Okay, no. And what about these amyloid PET scans? Is it from men or women? Can you tell this? Again, women, you should say, maybe we should put a poll on this. Okay, so and what about the diagnostic criteria? Are they different for men and women? So there are so many, wise people that have assembled for many days and made this criteria, and in the past other people. So did they somehow adjust for sex or gender, let's say, better concerning the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease? Still, there is no such evidence that could help us with the diagnostic process that's dependent on gender. So, is it true what Christina said, that there are more women with Alzheimer's disease than men? Of course, I cannot argue with this. This is from an older study, and you see that this is an age-dependent process, and as people age, the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease increases. And it seems, at least at that time, it was a little more for women than men. And of course, from other studies, you can see that the lifetime, let's say, risk of Alzheimer's disease is, the lifetime risk for men and women is different by twofold. And this is true in the age of 45 and in the age of 65. So for some reason, women have doubled the risk in their life to develop Alzheimer's disease. And on the same time, of course, to become caregivers of Alzheimer's disease patients, as Dr. Lyketsos said before. But of course, one of the reasons that we could say this is because, sorry, this can happen in the worst time, okay? So the reason, one of the reasons that we think this happens is because women live longer. And this was something that we knew from the past. But one question would be, why is this happening? And the second is this going on continuously? Is it going to go on for the future? Let me change the slide. Okay. So this observation that men live less than women was true in the old times, but it seems that the two curves are approaching in our day. So maybe sometime in the future, we think they could even be closer. And one of the main factors why there are more women with Alzheimer's disease, which is the difference in lifetime expectancy, would be not operational anymore. So what about the incidence? Let's say that we explain the difference in prevalence by the increased life expectancy, at least in part. What about the incidence? Is it true that the incidence is higher in women than in men? I think the results are at least contradictory. And there are, for example, some studies, even from the United States, this is a study back in 2000, that showed just a trend for women to have higher incidence rates than men. And this was not significant. And there are other studies that have come to the same conclusion. And even more, this is a study from the UK, a more recent study. What they did, it's similar what has been done in the Framingham study, and of course the results were similar. People studied with a 2-year difference a given population from the UK, and this was performed from 1990 to 1995, and then again at 2008 and 2013, and see what happens in the oldest of the participants. You see that men in the first study, which was 20 years earlier than the second study, had an incidence of dementia which was quite significant. But then 20 years later, it dropped almost to half in the oldest, and by 1/3 in the less old people. And for the woman, there was not a big change in this incidence. So it seems that the incidence issue is somehow contradictory, and there is some evidence that the incidence in women can maybe stays the same, and the incidence in men is dropping in some studies. So we concluded so far that the prevalence, it's true that's higher in women. The incidence in some studies say there is some difference. Some studies say that's no difference. Some studies even show that the opposite of what we expect, that the incidence is higher in men. So I think we can have a strong conclusion about this. So let's look then at the causes, the reasons that people develop dementia, and especially of Alzheimer's type. And as Christina said, there are different causes that you can get dementia. One part is the biological, the hormonal or the genetic background. I will not dare talk about hormones because I know Ioannis Sotiropoulos and Christina are there, and I will not go into that in details. But about the genetics, let's start first from one part about what happens, what's the difference between men and women, and this is mainly, not only, the X chromosome. And there are some variants in the X chromosome that could be detrimental or could be even protective. And this is from a recent study from our group, where we showed that people carrying the GLUT2, this is a gene that's expressed in the brain, and this has been associated with glutamatergic neurotransmission, that the GLUT2 variant, serine 498 alanine, is more frequent in the controls compared to the patients with Alzheimer's disease or MCI. And this happens even in males and females. Of course, the difference between males and females, because this is an X-linked, this gene resides on the X chromosome. The difference is that in some males, you have also the normal or the wild type allele, and you have also the variant allele. Of course, we did a replication cohort from the SCEPSI and Cretan aging cohort, and one from the ADNI that people gave us the data, the genetic data. There was still a trend that was somehow corroborating our findings, even though this didn't reach statistical significance. In conclusion, the X chromosome-based genes can play a role, but maybe this is not something universal. What about the ApoE? And I saw Christina before presenting some studies about the role of ApoE in women. So this is even better. Sorry, Christina. This is 58,000 participants in this meta-analysis. And what they did, they took all the studies they could with the role of ApoE in differences in E4 and the sex-related risk for Alzheimer's disease. And what did they found? That for the conversion of a normal individual to Alzheimer's disease in the age of 60 or in the age of 80, there's no difference between men and women. So women with the E3, with the epsilon-3, epsilon-4 genotype, and men with epsilon-3, epsilon-4 genotype is the white circles. The only difference was at the age of 70, but on the other age groups, it was no different, and this was a marginal difference. And of course, for the conversion of normal control to mild cognitive impairment, again, there was no difference. We are talking about a 58,000 people study, meta-analysis. And again, there was no difference in different age groups. And again, in the conversion of Alzheimer's disease, MCI to Alzheimer's disease, no difference between men and women. So it seems at least we cannot conclude about the role of ApoE being different in men and women. So what about culture and occupation and environment? Is it different for men and women? And of course, we're talking about now about the gender, and I like that Christina presented the difference of sex and gender. So this again from our observations. This is the Cretan aging cohort study that we have performed in collaboration with many other colleagues. This was a big reference population. What we found in our population, which are people visiting primary healthcare facilities, we have a 10%, around 10% prevalence of dementia, mostly of the Alzheimer type, and most of them have not been diagnosed before. Interestingly, you see what we found about the frequency of dementia in this population. You see the woman is the dotted line. And this seems similar to other studies from all over the world. You see that the more women age, the more the frequency of dementia increases. But what about men? You see in men, we have a peak of dementia at the age of 80 to 84. And then this drops to 85 plus, meaning that in contrary to what we have observed worldwide, older men had a lower prevalence or frequency of dementia compared to younger men. And this drives, of course, the overall results, which is the black line. And this was associated with less education. And this loss of education was attributed to World War II. And of course, you see that women at all age group had a lower education. And maybe this was the reason that older women had increased dementia frequency. So education is one important factor, and this is, of course, found in other studies too. What about work experience? This is a rather recent study from the US. What it says that women that work in their young age compared to women that don't go to work and they are more, staying at home or doing being without work, they have less cognitive decline through different age groups. So again, this is something that could have an effect in women, and maybe since the working profiles are changing, this could lead to lower prevalence of dementia in women. So to conclude, because we don't have a lot of time, to my view, there are no large or at least consistent differences in the incidence of Alzheimer. Even, I admit, there are more women than men in this patient population. Of course, there is a contribution of reduced survival in men for many reasons, like cardiovascular disease, etc. And there are still possible differences in etiology. So there are genetic, hormonal, of course, these are sex-related, and things like education, profession, attitudes toward health that could affect the gender. And we need more studies to drive treatment and risk management. And of course, I would like to say that to conclude that AD is not unique to women, but if we think that if this is a woman's disease, maybe, I'm not saying for sure, that this would create obstacle to research and of course can interfere with care, like maybe women are more worried, or there could be diagnostic bias in some cases. And maybe we should think more as precision medicine instead of sex-specific medicine, and think about what Hippocrates said long ago. Of course, he was a man, and he didn't bother about this, but it's far more important to know what person the disease has than what disease the person has. And with this, thank you for your attention.
Very nice from both of you. Very good, laying up the situation very nicely. We're a little behind time, so rather than me ask questions, I'm going to give Christina the opportunity to ask Yanni a question and hear his answer, and then the other way around. So Christina, you go.
Okay.
One from you for Yanni, and then Yanni, as brief an answer as you can give.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So I wanted to say first that we agree that we need more research. So at least we agree on that.
Yeah, on male or female mice?
on both. And humans, of course.
Okay.
on everything. And
I think
the question is about diagnostic criteria, because you say that they are not adjusted for women or they are different. But do you know any disease about the brain? Don't tell me about the uterus, about the brain. Do you know any neuropsychiatric disease that has different criteria for men and women, different rating scales, anything different? Has anyone even bothered ever to do that? Even for autism or ADHD?
Yeah.
Or depression, who is
for example, of the brain. So yeah, it's not there are no diseases, to my view, that are based on different diagnostic criteria, but still you have some diseases that you take into account the sex or the gender of the individual. So for management, for example, the carotid disease criteria for performing endarterectomy, they are somehow different concerning men and women.
I'm talking about the brain.
Yeah, me too, because the carotids give blood to the brain. So it's close. Yeah, for the brain, I mean, interestingly enough, there are differences in other diseases, like frontotemporal dementia is more common in men, and Lewy body dementia is more common in men, and Parkinson's disease dementia is more common in men. Still, this is not, there are no diagnostic criteria incorporating this. But this doesn't mean that, this somehow supports my view that there's no difference between men and women, so you shouldn't have asked this.
Nobody ever did this work. That's especially at least for depression, that I know much better the field.
Yeah, you are right.
All the rating scales were developed on men. All the treatments. I don't want to start about the treatments, but they were.
We have a point of inflection here. Is maybe more research would make a case that we need to vary the diagnostic criteria. Yanni, your chance to ask Christina a question.
So Christina, do you think it's about the research part, the basic research part? Is it a point there because of female, for example, mice? You need to adjust for the different cycle, their menstrual cycle, let's say conditions, etc. Is it much more difficult to correspond this to the research in male mice?
Yes, thank you for this question, because I didn't have time to say anything about that. Actually, that was the idea before, that female animals are more variable in behavior, and that's why they were not doing any research on females. But there are recent meta-analyses showing that they are not more variable than males, because testosterone also fluctuates, and there is a fluctuation in testosterone that is during the day, not even during the week. And actually, I don't know if we have 1 minute to show you this slide that I saw before, but so...
Keep it to a real minute, not a Christina minute.
Yes, okay. Not here on the right. Here you can see the difference in for humans and in hormones for humans and in rats. On the right are the rats. So you can see there is a fluctuation in testosterone also in males. So there is a lot of data nowadays showing that we shouldn't treat female mice differently than males, and we should do both at the same time. And if there are some sex differences in the basic research, then we can go and apply that on the clinical research. So
very good. It's a great discussion. Let's see, why don't we see from others? I'd like to get one question for Yanni and then a question for Christina. So who has a question for Yanni?
I could start with one question, if you allow me, until more people from the audience will ask. So Yanni, you and Christina speak about the hormone replacement therapy. And so people that are listening, and especially, when they're close to the menopause age, Christina mentioned that there is probably a special or a specific time window where this could be beneficial against dementia. So what is your view on the clinical data existed? Because Christina presented already this. So what do you think about this? What do you recommend to people that they're in the menopause and they have even a historic, risk in the family about dementia or Alzheimer?
Yes, thank you for this question. And this is something that we see in the clinic. I wouldn't recommend hormonal replacement therapy just for prevention of Alzheimer's disease because we don't have the data there to guide us on this. Of course, if there are other reasons for a woman to take hormonal replacement therapy, this is another thing. But just for Alzheimer's disease prevention, in my view, I wouldn't recommend this.
So is Maria, do you have a question for Yanni or for Christina? Because it's Christina's turn.
I think they can share the question. So I was thinking, listen, first of all, I would like to congratulate both presenters trying to convince us. I was thinking that this swift, let's say, during the last years of frequency of incidence of Alzheimer's in men versus women could be attributed to the fact that, based on this Framingham study that Ioannis showed us, to the fact that, cardiovascular factors have been much better controlled lately, and they have become evident during the last 20 years. People take more, the limits, the thresholds for antihypertensive medication, etc., are much stricter now. So people they're more careful with all this, and all this may be associated with the decrease of Alzheimer's disease in men lately. I wanted to ask Yanni, Christina, if they have a comment. While depression is still double in women, and insomnia is also much more frequent in women, and these factors also associate with cognitive disorders. So, any of the speakers, if they would like to make comment on that.
Well, why don't we start with Christina, so we try and have balanced approach.
Okay, regarding cardiovascular, I agree, it's a good point, but it doesn't explain us why women progress faster from MCI to Alzheimer's disease. I guess it's also the effect of estrogen, that with menopause, estrogen decreases. We know that the estrogen are neuroprotective, but I think it's one factor, but it's much more complicated. And for depression and all the other, also many other diseases, symptoms, insomnia, anxiety, all these are more frequent in women than men. And we don't really know. We know that it's something multifactorial. It's the fluctuation of hormones. It's not just the existence of estrogen or not, because we know that I also mentioned that there are neurosteroids in the brain. We know that the brain makes all the steroids. So it's the fluctuation of hormones that women, every month, they go through this whole change. And also with the perimenopause or the pregnancy and lactation and all this. There are also genetic factors. It's very societal factors, I think, play the least role in my, of course, I'm biased because I'm a neuroscientist, but there are many hormonal, genetic, transcriptomics seems to play, neuroimmune evidence, epigenetic evidence. It's so many evidence about these differences that we cannot really isolate one reason.
Other questions? Nico, you seem to be ready.
Any answer? I don't know about the first.
Can I comment on this or?
Sure. If not,
Yes.
let's see if there's another question before. Okay, go ahead and comment.
Yeah, I totally agree with Christina that this is a multifactorial, and you know, if you want to isolate one factor, then you are doomed to fail. And I think Maria's question is very interesting in the sense that, as I said in one of my last slides, we should more think about precision medicine and, you know, take sex or gender as one of the factors, and then on this try to accumulate evidence from other factors and make a multifactorial approach for each patient. And this is the hard part in the research of Alzheimer's disease. And we don't even know if Alzheimer's disease is one in every patient that we see is the same Alzheimer's disease.
Yanni, I have a question for you. You started out with a good approach to showing the images and saying, well, now tell me, is this a man or a woman? And the answer, of course, is nobody can tell. But are the brains of men and women different in some way?
That's a good question. So, can I ask?
Consistently different.
Are their bodies different? What do you think?
Size is different, right? I mean, the size of the woman's brain is on the order of 70 to 75%. And yet, with less brain, look at what they can accomplish.
Yeah, I agree that there is a different, let's say, wiring, but there's so much plasticity in the human brain that you cannot tell that have just one answer is different in this part or different in the other part. In total, of course, there is different processes going on. There are different hormonal backgrounds for the brain function.
You will agree that women and men have different brains then. You just made the point. They're smaller and they have different processes of various kinds. Yeah, but
as I said before, there is a lot of plasticity. So can you use the brain in some way and develop a part of the brain? It's like the muscles. A woman can train her muscles and they become big. So it's not a matter of size. It's not a matter of these types of differences. How you use and you have the plasticity in the brain. But since the degenerative process begins, I think the amyloid plaques are the same, even though some can say there are more somewhere, less somewhere, or the tau tangles is there any evidence that they are different? It's the same. So the pathological process is the same.
Christina, you have your hand up.
Yes, just to add to this, actually, I'm studying sex differences for 25 years from when I was a student. And I actually agree they're not so different. And there are many researchers nowadays that they talk about a mosaic of male and female in the brain. And some of us are more to the female and others to the male side. But of course, there are some very big differences, not big, but they are very consistent differences that they have to do with sexual behavior, that we see the same in animals and in all mammals anyway, and some birds. So there are some brain regions that they are very much sex differentiated. And but even the hormones, as I said many times, they are in the brain, they are the same, but the amount changes. The amount and the influence from sex differentiated organs like the gonads, which of course influence the brain. So I think at the end I will talk about not many differences, and Ioannis will say about the differences.
Yeah, you see, Kostas is driving to change positions. Like yes. I will be.
He's a diplomat.
Yannis Sotiropoulos.
Yes, thanks. Actually, I would like to point, trying to merge a bit the two in a way that a new aspect of the difference in vulnerability is also suggesting on being on vulnerability on different circuits, brain circuits. For example, and then I will ask the question. For example, we know there's nice work from Georgia Holtz when she was in Nestor Lab, showing that there were specific areas that were more vulnerable to stress or different changes or hormonal changes in women than men, like locus coeruleus, for example. And the fact we know that, for example, Christina's work in the past on different circuits and responses to antidepressants or other drugs is completely different between male and female, even to the same response to the antidepressant response with the same beneficial. So in one, there was an increase in one area, prefrontal cortex, in the males were decreased, but the circuit was dysregulating, the dysregulation or regulation by the antidepressant was different between men and women with the same beneficial output. So my question is there any clinical or experimental studies that they say that there are different activity on circuits and vulnerability of brain areas, not like hippocampus, but also driving circuits that can be different between male and female, and that can drive, you know, different incidents or increased risk in women versus men? Is there any default network, let's say MRI studies, not structural, but functional, for example?
Either of the speakers have an answer?
As far as I know, they are not very consistent. There is, of course, there's a lot of effort to find this data, but they're not very consistent. And they're very much influenced by the cycle, the environment, and many other factors. I was asked that before, and I never really found any. There are some very good studies, but then there is another study that says the opposite.
That's everywhere in Alzheimer's disease. You have one study and you have another study saying the opposite. So,
Kostas, the reason I'm asking is because there are also differences between age periods. So between 60, 65, there could be different risk factors and different regulators than 70, 75 and vice versa. Kostas, what, do you have any network data in your hands or?
Not heard of it. I don't know of any differences. But I am noticing we're at the top of the hour, and I'm hoping that Mr. Zaganas can put up the first question again so that we see who has changed the most minds, if any. So this is the question number one, Alzheimer's is different in men versus women. So go ahead and vote, drum roll, and the person who's changed more minds than others will get a very nice dinner in Baltimore on me. You just have to get here.
That's a good offer.
That's very cheap.
Oh!
How much the ticket for Baltimore?
It's worth it, Yanni.
Okay, next time we'll be at the States. We'll let you know. We didn't talk about the caregivers at all.
We didn't. There's lots and lots to talk about, and that could be a good later discussion. Do we have results of the voting? Oh, Christina.
Thank you.
Oh, congratulations, Christina. I must say that I admire the work of Christina, and for no reason I would say that this is not important, the difference, so just for the sake of discussion.
I think it's a good exercise, and I'm really pleased we pulled off this debate style today with all the Zoom accoutrements. It might be a format, Yanni, to consider for other topics in the future. So, Yanni, I give it back to you.
Thanks, Kostas. Thanks, Ioannis Zaganas and Christina Dalla and Professor Kostas Lyketsos for this really interesting, not only the scientific discussion, but also the format and interaction. I think this could be a nice example for future seminars in HIAAD, but also in other topics where we're discussed. So thanks again for being with us together, for all the friends in Zoom and scientists, as well as family members that they follow us today on Zoom and on YouTube. We will be together not in December because we'll have our Christmas break, but in the second week of January, just for a little change. After Christmas period and holidays, we will be back with very interesting points. There's a lot of people that have suggested to speak with us and present us data from different questions. And we will continue next year with higher gear and much more hope that we can force interactions between researchers in Greece and abroad and in the United States. And I remind to everybody, because this is the last seminar for this year of HIAAD, that this seminar, The Bridges, is exactly to bring together basic and clinical scientists like today with Christina, Ioannis, and Kostas, with different expertise, and trying to answer the same questions, forcing collaborations, forcing interactions, and at the end, we hope that the third, let's say, action of HIAAD, which is to really translate all this basic translational research and effort to better care to people, as we are trying to also to harmonize all the existing centers for Alzheimer's disease around the world. So that's a word about the HIAAD three main actions that you all know. And we hope that we will continue next year with more participants and more interesting topics. Thanks, everybody.
Yanni, so just to be clear, the next two dates are January 11th at 5 p.m. Athens.
Exactly.
February 1st, 5 p.m. Athens time, and it's going to be the first Thursday at 5 p.m.
Exactly. Kostas, you said it very clear. So thanks again to everybody. Thanks for the technical support. That was a bit challenging to do it this day, and we hope we will have you with us in 11th of January, 5 o'clock Greek time. Thanks. Have a nice night.
Bye.